Hello, Thrivecasters. We have a wonderful guest today. This is Jordan Tigani, CEO of MotherDuck, and I'm sure many of you might know him, but for the ones who have not known him, he's one of the original creators for the BigQuery at Google. He's also helped build one of the most powerful cloud data warehouses in the world. I think I came to know about BigQuery almost about 4 or 5 years back in my previous startup, and we just about chose to use BigQuery when Google essentially gave BigQuery for free, for almost and a big quota for that. So thank you to Jordan and his team for creating a beautiful warehouse there. I came to know about Jordan in almost about maybe 2.5, 3 weeks back when he was speaking at the Founder Nexus Summit here in Seattle. He had a very interesting story. I'll let him speak through that as well. But he's, from a quick introduction standpoint, he's now building MotherDuck. It's, looks like it's an incredibly fast, developer-friendly analytics platform. We've been talking about, figuring out whether ThriveStack and MotherDuck, can come together. And since then, I love the conversation. I thought we should get Jordan on a podcast here. So Jordan, welcome to the podcast. How do you feel?
Great, thanks. Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to the conversation.
So wonderful. Jordan, could you maybe tell a story a little bit about, your own background first, and maybe, all the way starting from, you had a product management software background, and you've taken many jobs in between and honed your skills, and now you're running, MotherDuck. So could you tell the story of maybe your journey, in short, from entering in the software world, product management, and then being an entrepreneur?
Sure, absolutely. I actually got my started as a software engineer. I was at Microsoft, kind of in the in even the pre-Ballmer days, the Bill Gates days, working on Windows, and was also in Microsoft Research, and I was there for a while, and I was really intrigued by startups. So I kind of bounced back and forth between like big companies and small companies. Kind of learned, some of what not to do from some startups. Also that you can, grow your career and your skills very quickly by working at startups. But also you can see kind of what's the right way to do things at a big company. I ended up at Google when back in the beginning of the big data era, when I had previously been at a startup that was a very small startup, but they had huge amounts of data. And I'm like, hey, big data is here. Big data is going to change everything. And who gets big data more than anybody else? That was Google. So I went to Google, and pretty soon found myself on a team that was supposed to build a data marketplace. And we decided not to build the data marketplace. We decided to build BigQuery instead. And that was a fun ride. And that was like, I was on that for 10 years. So I started as an engineer, built a lot of the core pieces. I ended up leading the engineering team for a while, till about 100 people. Then I switched to product as a product manager, and kind of helped get BigQuery to around 800 million in ARR. And then it was like sort of 10 years of working on the same thing. And it felt like that's a long time to work on the same thing. And I ended up going to SingleStore, which is then called MemSQL, as the chief product officer. So I kind of got a chance to use kind of both sides of my brain. Like I led engineering, because I still consider myself sort of like at least an engineer at heart. But then also, like, kind of once you do product for a little while, you realize that the world is so much kind of broader than just building cool technology. And if you build cool technology, if it's not the right thing at the right time for the right people, the right use cases, and the right packaging and pricing, then it doesn't matter how cool your technology is. Like, it's not gonna actually do anything meaningful. So I get a chance to wear both of those hats. At SingleStore, I helped them kind of build out their SaaS offering. Kind of when I got there, it was, almost zero ARR, and like, kind of we rebuilt the stack, and it was 18 months later, it was almost 20 million ARR. So they built, it was a pretty cool thing. And I'd been seeing, saw this open source database called DuckDB, and it kind of showing up on some benchmarking reports. And it could do stuff that SingleStore couldn't. It could scale down really, really nicely. And single store is a distributed database, meaning it runs on multiple servers at the same time and has to coordinate. And that was really the way that the database world was going. And in order to handle scale, in order to like, hey, if you have really big data, you have to uh, build in this certain type of architecture. I also saw there was one of our customers, Sony, that was a very large customer, and they, instead of running in distributed mode on multiple servers, they just ran it on these giant machines. And the really interesting thing about Sony was they never had any problems. We never heard any support problems. It's like, they kind of were steadily growing their use cases. And it's like, hey, everybody's working on building these complicated distributed systems that run, have all this coordination stuff, and they're really hard to build. But having, building something that scales up can do a lot. Machines are giant now.
Yeah.
And so if you took something like this DuckDB, this kind of single node, this was an open source project, you could build something that scales down to 0, so you can make it serverless, and it could scale up to really like Sony style workloads. I mean, that's not a small company. And like somebody should really build that. And meanwhile, I got fired from my job at Single Store. It was differences of opinion with the CEO. That it happens. That's the occupational hazard of being a leader at a startup. And so I was kind of found without a job, and I'm like, maybe I should build this like serverless DuckDB in the cloud. And so I asked somebody for an intro to the DuckDB founders to see maybe if they'd give me a job, like maybe they, I could help them build the SaaS service. And they said, we're not really interested in building a cloud service, but we'd love to partner with you on it if you were going to do something like that. And so I'm like, maybe I should go do this. I got an intro to a VC. The VC said, hey, it sounds cool, I want to fund it. And then we were sort of off to the races. And that was just about 3 years ago. And so we've been sort of building ever since then.
Yeah, that seems like a familiar story, right? So you have an engineering background, things pretty sharp on this. Product management opens the door, and then single store closes the door, and sometimes when closing the door leads to some really good, interesting things. So if single store had not closed the door, you may not have thought about MotherDucks. And all in all, it's probably a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the best things that's happened to me in my career, was getting fired from that job. And it didn't feel like it at the time. It was certainly a very, very difficult time. But I kind of, sometimes you need that shock to sort of force you out of your like, okay, what's the next step? What's the next step? And then you really can find out what you can do.
Yeah, it's interesting. So maybe tell us a little more about MotherDuck. I know you looked at the DuckDB model, and then you decided to go build a company around it. But yet, Google's approach, BigQuery's approach. I think most of the times people buy BigQuery not by going to they might try it without talking to a sales guy, but they really start paying only after they talk to a sales guy, especially BigQuery, right? It's pretty expensive to go do something of that sort. But yet, DuckDB, an open source approach, and now you're taking MotherDuck on a product-led approach. Could you maybe share a little bit about why did you look at MotherDuck and start with the product-led approach? And I see that there's a lot of things that you're doing, which is very, very PLG-centric, right? So you have self-serve, value proposition, usage-based pricing. So you have essentially, moved the lever from a 100% sales-led approach like a data warehouse, to a very user-friendly PLG approach with MotherDuck. Could you maybe share some insights onto what made you think, in those terms, and why PLG for MotherDuck?
Sure. To take just a little step back, I kind of mentioned I went to Google for, to do big data, and, BigQuery is big data. But one of the things that I noticed actually at working on BigQuery was most of our customers didn't have big data. And most of the, even if they did have big data, most of the time they would use their their workloads were actually running over small data, or if they were running over big data, they were running over small slices of their larger tables. So you didn't really need big compute, and that was sort of the one of the key insights for starting MotherDuck, was that, like, big data. I wrote a blog post called "Big Data is Dead," about how you don't really need the kinds of things that we were building in the big data era, and there was an opportunity for something much simpler.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, the single node, scale up, scale down, serverless, kind of approach. But other than that, it was sort of the same thing as BigQuery. So if you could build BigQuery, but just much more simply, we could do it less expensively, easier to use, et cetera, and more portable. And so, like, that's sort of what we were building with, why we wanted to build MotherDuck. And that, I think, really lent itself to a product first, a product led approach, because, I think if you were going after, first of all, we're going after kind of the lower, at least the smaller end of the market to start out with,
Mm-hmm.
just because, like, the enterprise world for analytics is super saturated. The CIOs, the CTOs, the chief data officers, like, they're getting inundated with, requests for, run a POC of my thing versus
Mm-hmm.
your thing. And, like, it's just like this very, very, like, everybody is up there focusing on that.
Yeah.
And because everybody's focusing on that, it means, like, you can only focus on so many things at once. It means they're not focusing on sort of the longer tail. And another lesson at BigQuery was actually there was a lot of revenue in the longer tail, first of all. And second of all, if you can win the longer tail, you can work your way into
Enterprise.
bigger organizations. And so that was sort of our idea, is that, hey, we'll work on the long tail, we'll get, mind share. And then and that'll help us, it'll help us learn and perfect and, really get product market fit if people just sort of love the product and love what you're doing. And then, hey, if people love the product, they'll figure out a way to use that in the enterprise, in bigger companies. So that was sort of why we wanted to go with the product led approach. It's also product led is harder because
Yeah.
the product has to be ready. It has to be good, and, like, it has to be something that, like, people can just pick up and fall in love with and continue to use, and, like, and build this momentum. It's also hard because you get a lot less feedback. If you're doing a sales led approach, and you go and you sit with a customer and say, hey, how do you like this, and what do you think? And you have a sales engineer, and you kind of work with somebody on connecting things. The customer will tell you, oh, this is kind of cool, but it doesn't have this thing, or this doesn't work, or, like, but in product led approach, if you don't have that thing, they'll just, like, give up. They'll just go away, like, yeah, I guess this doesn't work. And it might be something you're shipping next week, or it might be something, if they told you that you didn't have, like, you could do it easily. But that's was one of the kind of the tricky things on the product led growth path. Luckily, the DuckDB that we were building on top of is an amazing piece of software, and that, like, there was a lot of love for DuckDB. We also had this sort of interesting relationship with the DuckDB team and the DuckDB project. So DuckDB is an open source database created by a couple of people in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
Now they have their own company called DuckDB Labs around that. And so when we started, we didn't want to just say, hey, awesome, thanks for the open source project. We're going to take it and try to make a bunch of money out of it. We said, hey, we want to collaborate with you. And so we gave them a co-founder share of the company when we started.
Okay. That's pretty unheard of. Okay, congrats.
Yeah, I think it's a different model for open source. In exchange, like, they gave us exclusive, so they won't work with anybody who is building something competitive. Like, there's a lot of sort of really nice partnership things, including some PLG hacks that we've gotten into the open source project. So, in DuckDB, if you can open a database, just you give it a name, like foo.db. It's a local, and it sits on your local file, or your local file system. Mm-hmm. If you change the database name and it starts with MD for MotherDuck, MD : mm-hmm. that will load the MotherDuck extension. It'll run in the cloud.
Wow.
So
Okay.
people don't have to install anything differently. Anybody who's using DuckDB can just switch to MotherDuck just by changing, 3 characters as a prefix
Okay.
on their database name. So it's like this sort of gave us a way of like taking all the, there's DuckDB excitement, and DuckDB is growing like crazy. When we started, they were doing 4,000 downloads a month. I think now they're doing like, I don't know, not sorry, 40,000 downloads a
40,000.
month.
Yeah.
Now
That's
they're
what I thought.
doing
Yeah.
9 million a month or something. It's,
Wow.
it's really, really um, been taking off. So they gave us that kind of hack in. The other hack in was like we built a UI for our UI,
Mm-hmm.
and so what we did is we rebranded the UI to look like to be DuckDB, and made it work with just pure DuckDB without using MotherDuck. And so then anybody using DuckDB could use this UI, and then we actually built it into the open source
Yeah.
project. So if you DuckDB, dash UI, it'll pop our UI that runs locally. But it also has like a login to MotherDuck button at on the corner. So basically, we provided something to the community, but also has these sort of nice connectivity to our product.
Okay.
And I think the way that we could do this is by having this partnership with the team. It's also really nice that like in terms of just building sustainable open source is like DuckDB Labs is focused on building a great database, building a great open source project, like and is going to be is pure open source, is not and they can be kind of funded to do this, and at the same time we can have a venture scale company that is sort of focused on being for profit, and they can also subsidize what they're doing, and so they get what they want, which is like to build a great product and a great open source experience, and then we want is we can build a company that is built on top of amazing open source. And you see a lot of like challenges with this in the open source world. So our belief is that if this works, it'll be a model that other people can use. If it doesn't work, it'll be a cautionary tale.
Yeah. I think this is a very very new model. I think the last couple of years there's been so many court cases on MongoDB suing Amazon about stealing and making money off it. And you have so many cases like that, right? So RDS versions, which were cloud hosted versions, Amazon would get benefited from it, Azure would get benefited from it, but the underlying open source, organization would not. So this curtailed a lot of that innovation. So your model probably would be a fantastic model, and if it scales, if it works, this should be the go-to model for open source, versus open source is its own stream. You go build a community around it, and then have a hosted solution, which is a commercial offering of that. And if it's a separate company, I think this is a great model for IP sharing, and scaling together. Let me follow that with a question.
Sure.
How does that, how is that partnership benefiting you? Are you seeing, an uptick in terms of the sign up? Walk us through on the customer journey. Like, how does anyone who's using, DuckDB, are they the only ones who would essentially go look at upgrading to a hosted MotherDuck version of it? Or are you finding customers who are outside of that particular purview, outside of the DuckDB ecosystem, coming to MotherDuck? So how's your prospecting looking like? How do they discover you? Meaning from a GTM standpoint, what does the funnel look like? How do you market it? How do you bring the acquisitions in?
Sure. I think from a technical perspective, being the partnership works really nicely because if anybody's ever tried to build on top of open source, and it's there are things that aren't going to work right, or things that you need, or things plugins and hooks and like changes and features and like and scale that like aren't going to be there, and you either have to like fork it, and people generally fork it, and they it becomes very, very difficult to then keep that in sync. And so because of our relationship, we work really closely with the DuckDB Labs folks, and they're building the stuff that we need and the hooks that we need. And so we haven't had to fork, and basically we can sim ship, our, the DuckDB releases and MotherDuck releases, in sync. So from that perspective, it's been great. From the go-to-market perspective, a large proportion of our customers have experience using DuckDB.
Hmm.
Um, there is there is not necessarily a direct line right now from people being like, "Hey, I'm using DuckDB locally on my laptop, and now I want a hosted version of it." I think often the use cases are disjoint. So I think the halo and the excitement and the experience of using DuckDB, people love that.
Hmm.
But it's usually a new use case that then they pick up from, to use MotherDuck with. And so, some of the use cases there are, I mean, the two biggest ones are data warehousing. So if you are building, internal analytics, MotherDuck is a great, lightweight, super fast,
Hmm.
inexpensive data warehouse. And the other one is user facing analytics, where somebody is building an application, a SaaS application, and they want to show uh, uh, analytics to their end users, and we have a tenancy model where we can run like a separate DuckDB instance per end user that works really nicely for those use cases. And then so like the funnel, I think for those two things is a little bit different. A lot of our customer acquisition is organic.
Okay.
We're not doing any outbound right now. We have we write a lot of content, and I think our content drives people to think about and to use MotherDuck and DuckDB. We have like a we help sponsor one of the books that was written about DuckDB, and so you can download the ebook, and so that's a great source of leads.
Hmm.
um, there's people who are looking for just an inexpensive data warehouse. They may not even know what DuckDB is, and we have a decent number of those folks as well. We started off doing pure self-serve, pure PLG, and found that we were leaving a lot of opportunity on
Right.
the table.
That's what I thought.
Um, and so we kind of switched to a more of a product-led sales, so meaning people come in, um, and as they are coming into the product, they they get started, um, and then for good prospects, we will kind of fork them off and have them talk to sales. And so, and then we run, anybody can sign up for a free trial. So you sign up, you're on the free trial, and we have this sort of like pressurized 21 days before you have to either start paying or go to our free tier. And the free tier has some more limitations. But that's also when our sales team tries to engage with people and be like, "Hey, any questions, anything we can help you with? Here's how things actually work." It's a great way for us to get feedback on, the things that aren't working, and people are like, "Hey, we really wish that it was in this
Yeah.
region, or we really wish that you had this security feature or this other thing." And sometimes there are just things that are hard in the product, and we need to do more work to get that done. But there's kind of two separate parallel paths in our funnel. The top part is sort of the sales, and the bottom part is like kind of the pure self-serve.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of paths in between those two, and then loops, because it's also a land and expand business.
Yeah.
And so you start out in the self-serve, and then you get to a point where, like, hey, you're using it, your usage is growing, but often, talking to salespeople, our sales team, like, they can give you a few in exchange for an annual discount or annual commit. We'll give you a discount. You can hear what new features are coming, and we can work with you. But some people just don't like to talk to salespeople, and some people just like, "Hey, I just want a database. I just want it to work." And that's also entirely fine. But then the loops come in, as we as we want to grow accounts. I think analytics. James Hamilton from Amazon, he's like one of their distinguished engineers from Amazon AWS. He said, analytics expands to fill your budget. So kind of people get started kind of at like a low price point, and then or smaller use case, and then their data gets bigger. They find new workloads. The second team picks it up. The marketing team says, "Hey, we want to do some marketing analytics," and so if you can get somebody in, it's a really great kind of base on which you can then start to sort of build new workloads. And you have to, and that's what sort of having an active sales team can also help people find and locate those additional sources in their company, and kind of encourage that spread, grow accounts. I think analytics, James Hamilton from Amazon, he's like one of their distinguished engineers from Amazon AWS. He said analytics expands to fill your budget. So kind of people get started kind of at like a low price point, and then they or smaller use case, and then their data gets bigger. They find new workloads. The second team picks it up. The marketing team says, "Hey, we want to do some marketing analytics," and so if you can get somebody in, it's a really great kind of base on which you can then start to sort of build new workloads. And you have to, and that's what sort of having an active sales team can also help people find and locate those additional sources in their company, and kind of encourage that spread. Often it does spread itself without you having to do anything, but sometimes it just sort of takes, hey, can we talk to the team? You mentioned that this thing was going on, this project, you were thinking about doing this. Can we talk to the people there? And often we can help kind of encourage things to move a little bit faster.
There's a lot of meaty topics in that. I think we have a lot of SaaS founders, growth leaders, in our podcast stream. So there are some meaty topics here. So let me go maybe digest a little bit on what you said.
Sure.
Right. So and help me if I've not understood it well enough. So the DuckDB, self-serve motion, gives you leads, but these are they're not, they may not be fully formed, right? So the companies that are coming in, they might have experience with DuckDB. They might have a new internal projects. When they start to spin off a new DuckDB instance, that's when they can use MD colon something and then have a hosted version of the MotherDuck. So that's one form of the lead that's coming in. There are other forms of the leads who are mostly self-serve. They come in with sign up on your MotherDuck portal itself, on your website. And then if the usage increases, and only if the usage increases, does your sales team, connect back with them? Or does it also, connect back if it's a larger company, if it's an enterprise account, or someone who's like a big fish that the sales team can actually go and catch them. So under what situations, would the sales team try to engage them back? Because I think most of the times DuckDB users are the end users. They are the developers who are just standing it up. But in your case, you might probably have to do some kind of an enrichment to go understand who the organization is and what might be the potential budget, for the sales team to even qualify whether these are rightful leads. So how does maybe if you can throw in a little bit of light on when does the sales team engage? Is it very likely it's not on every single sign up? They might have to wait for a little bit. If it's probably smaller fish or smaller potatoes, what's the cultural connotation around that? They may ignore it for some time unless the usage increases. Would that be the case? Or they only go after mid-sized to larger companies based on the usage and the enrichment? What's the mechanism that you have found that works for you?
Yeah, that's a great question, because the pure product-led sales approach typically is, you wait until somebody's usage grows to a certain point, and then they become a product qualified lead, and then the sales team gets involved and be like, hey, why don't you, we'll give you a discount, or you help them grow, etc. And I think that's sort of leaving some usage on the table, especially if you haven't kind of perfected the self-service, side of the product. And if you can make it super, super easy to use and delightful and have all the right product tours and everything that people would need, I think you can get away with that. But one of the things that we found is that it's, quite helpful to have our sales team interject a little bit earlier. So you're right, we do a bunch of enrichment. There's also a lot of people that sign up with their personal accounts, but because they're poking the tires, but they also, have a day job that is, working, on something else. And so just because somebody has a personal account doesn't mean they're not not actually interesting. But we do enrichment to find out, what companies people are from and kind of what their job titles are. And, we have, a couple of BDRs that help us, with some, lead scoring
Mhm.
and so, yeah, bigger companies, more interesting companies, we will then, sequence them and kind of direct them to sales. Some people, just don't want to talk to sales. They just want to, they ignore us, and that's fine. People, I I don't like to talk to salespeople either, and totally get that. That's and so that's a valid way through the product. And that's one of the reasons I said we have sort of several of these lines
Yeah.
that go between the sort of the self-service and the sales led motions. And so I think over time, one of the things that we're trying to do is we are trying to sort of, you know, have more, have more people on the self-service side,
Yeah.
and for longer, because that drives down the customer acquisition costs. You spend, you don't need as many salespeople or as many sales touches. But that's something that you want to make sure you've got it right before you start doing that. Just because I think especially it depends on where you are in your journey. But for us, we're like, more sales, more salespeople working with customers, more sales, more revenue. And as long as that number is positive, and that correlation is positive, then I think we'll have a lot of these, the bigger customers, working with our sales teams earlier.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I think about maybe 2 years back or so, there were a lot of pure play PLG companies who not even have a sales team. I thought even though they were venture scale, they've taken at least about 10 to 15 million, funding. But I'm glad to see that you're not a pure player. It's a combination of PLG, product-led sales, and sales to intervene as appropriate. So let me maybe go to the next question, which slightly kind of keys off from here. I know that you and I we talked about usage-based pricing, right? For MotherDuck, and you're figuring it out on what would be the rationale behind the usage-based pricing. But if you're doing sales-led approaches, kind of intertwined with the product-led, could you maybe share, to me and maybe the audience on, uh, you know, at what point, of pricing do you think it works for you from a pure play PLG standpoint, fully self-serve? What would be the typical monthly price point that someone is willing to pay without really talking to sales? And if you have the sales team come in, how does that change to the same account? Does the ACV of that account, increase significantly? What has been your experience around, having at least some kind of a platform fee and a usage-based pricing? And does that differ between, the size of the company and the deal sizes, would differ from that?
I think so. First of all, one of the reasons that we have usage-based pricing is just because we have to. I
Mhm.
think as an infrastructure company, it's relatively easy for somebody to, not even a huge company, to spin up a workload that would cost us a ton of money.
Yeah.
So, seat-based pricing or all you can eat based pricing, like it it's very, very difficult and very risky to sort of size those right. And then the other thing is like, um, and so just from the liability perspective, it's just sort of much easier to um, to have a usage based pricing. The nice thing about usage based pricing is you see increases immediately.
Hmm.
So, if somebody adds a new workload or they do something more intense, like they start running something else, they have, their data grows, like the revenue just, starts to grow magically. And so you don't have to like go back and shake somebody down. You don't have to like, they don't have to like, they're not trying to optimize the number of seats that they have or whatever. It's just sort of like you can really tie the value to the price and your revenue stream. It's like, I'm delivering you more value because I'm doing more workloads for you, and so you're gonna pay me proportionally more. Like, it's a really, like, everybody kind of wins. And there are some downsides to it, which is the uh when sorry, lost my train of thought. There are some downsides to usage-based pricing, which are you're really at risk, or you're really sort of, there's an immediacy. So like the immediacy of somebody growing is really great, but there can also be the immediacy of like, hey, somebody, you lost a workload, or somebody decided to turn off a script or something, and all of a sudden your revenue drops, or somebody, it's easy for them to sort of optimize their usage. So we often see like this sort of really nice steep ramp,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can see there's sort of an optimization path. And so like it can be much harder to predict how much, what your revenue is going to be. It fluctuates day by day. So it can be very nice from it's nice to see the immediacy of the value that you're delivering to people. But it's also, it's a little bit more of a roller coaster ride, in that, um, small changes can sometimes have big impacts on your top line. And but I think it's a super powerful thing, and it's what's enables us to sort of like, scale revenue super fast, and have really high NRR, and like basically because like we're keep delivering more value, and so the revenue goes up quite steeply.
Yeah. Maybe a quick question on that. So when the sales team gets involved, what would be a typical, deal size? I'm thinking in terms of, if the sales team's there or the BDR's there, there's some quota realization that they need to, essentially have to figure out a way to pay it off, by the customer consumption. Do you have like a concept of free trial, and then they get to a particular state? Typical data products would have, it takes a lot of time to get the data in, run analytics on it, or start using that, in real production, scenarios. In my experience, it's at least more than 3+ months. But you have a very interesting case of 21 days as a free trial, and then the meter starts, right? So could you maybe share your thoughts on how did you get to that place? And if the sales team or the BDR team gets involved, uh,
So
are
it's
you able to
that's
close faster? And what's the deal sizes?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So one of the things, because salespeople are expensive, right? And if you're going to have, expensive, high earning, AEs, closing $5,000 deals, like that's probably, going to be setting your investors' money on fire,
Yeah.
pretty quickly. Um, and so we talked to a bunch of people who were early at Snowflake, and one of the things that they said is, look, we had our AEs, and I think, I think they said they were paying their AEs like 350K in OTE, um, on average. Like they were having them, they'd sign deals for 5K,
Mm-hmm.
and because they knew that they were going to grow. And so, for us, we're considering anybody a logo if they're at least 6K, because we know they're gonna grow, and they're gonna grow their usage. So we have a bunch of people that sign up themselves. They get to that level. They exceed that level. We also are pretty good at ramping people pretty quickly. Like, maybe it does take a little bit longer than 21 days to sort of
Mm-hmm.
to get into production, but we're finding kind of 6 weeks. We can get people really ramped and into production, and using real workloads. Um and often, uh and on the other side of it is like, we're not having the AEs just sort of find a 6K customer, and then like go off and find new customers. And that's why we're having uh full cycle salespeople that continue to work with the customer and finding new workloads and helping them grow. And it's why, like, while we do sign, we won't really sign an annual commit at that level usually, like, but very often those customers are up in the 30K, even and higher within a couple of months. And so, we keep very close tabs on what's the the average ACV is, and it works out. It works out in the end.
That's very good. Maybe I think if you're talking to Snowflake, they might sell you the concept of credits. Right, the sales team will go and extract pay first, and you can use the credits, so which means that you can get to an almost predictable, revenue model. But if you talk to the Salesforce customers, they may not like it. so, I think I think you have a good balance there.
Yeah, although I mean the the Snowflake perspective, like the credits are great because they become like casino
Yeah.
tokens. It's like, oh, I'm not dealing with dollars. I'm just dealing with credits, and like, yeah, whatever. I'm going to use, people use they burn a bunch of credits. The tricky thing about those, I mean, we do have like commits. Customers, we sell commits, but it's sorry, I lost my train of thought. It's too late on the day on a Friday. Oh, well, we can't recognize revenue until they actually use it. And so, there is a little bit of a tension to, like, salespeople want to get paid when they have the commit, but you still can't recognize the revenue until somebody uses it. And so for us, at least our internal reporting, I basically completely ignore commits. I just look at, what are people using? What do people use today? What do people use in the last 7 days? How is that growing? How is this customer growing their usage? Because the usage is value. And if we're delivering more value, then that's good. And if we're not, then it doesn't matter what somebody sold. They might have oversold, they might have undersold. I just want to know what people are doing.
Yeah, I think that probably that's a good North Star metrics. Usage typically becomes a leading indicator of future success. And I think you're doing all things right. So I know we will be out of time very soon. I have two questions, and maybe we can fast track some of them as well. And I asked this of any SaaS founder. What has changed, for someone like you in the last maybe 2 years or so since OpenAI announced, the Gen AI? How did Gen AI or any kind of AI, if you will, has changed how you think of building your products, selling them into the market? Maybe if you could, quickly summarize what's your AI adoption story with MotherDuck?
So first of all, like, AI has been a lot slower to make an impact in the data world than it has in the like rest of the software world. And I think I'd be happy to talk about those in detail, but this is probably not the right forum for it. So there's lots of opportunities to sort of incorporate AI features into the product. At this point, they're not like super compelling. Like, I don't think anybody has come up with something super compelling. There's making it so that you can build applications that are doing AI, and AI needs to do things that look like analytics. I think there's some opportunities for that, and like queries over semi-structured or unstructured data. There's some interesting areas around that. But I think the kind of the jury's out about how somebody is going to dramatically change the data world by using Gen AI. I'm fairly certain that the next giant data company is going to be a fundamentally AI company. I don't know what that. I wish I knew what that was going to look like. And hopefully hopefully we'll figure it out, and that'll be us. But I do think there's a bit of a cloud of uncertainty, and often that's also where there's opportunity as well.
Yeah, and I wish that that's MotherDuck. I have one last question. I know you mentioned about in the data world, AI does not have yet of a large impact, other than maybe structured to unstructured query. You'll be able to go query them. Bring some nice UI, some nice models around it. Maybe it's still machine learning. At scale. A question to you. What are you waiting for at MotherDuck for Jordan Tigani to write a CEO memo which says we're going to use AI across the board? MotherDuck is an AI company. Just like what Salesforce started doing it. So many other companies and the CEOs essentially penned down an entire memo that we're going to use AI in products, in marketing, blah, blah, blah. Like Intercom is now an AI company, right? Someone like that.
So we had our leadership team had to sit down and kind of have been thinking deeply about this and and I've been working with them on just sort of helping to drive AI throughout every department. And I think some people naturally take to it, and some people kind of have to be a little bit dragged to it and convinced. But I think virtually, like, because people think about AI in terms of, okay, it can speed up developers or can speed up um, can add things to the product. But in the sales process and sort of understanding your customers, and it can your BDRs can get more done, and you can in the marketing side, it can help with content generation. It can help with automating a bunch of things in enrichment. Like, we use it for a lot of enrichment things, where like the enrichment tools are good but not good enough. Pretty much every team and has opportunities to figure out how to do things with AI. And so we're not necessarily saying, like, sending out this big memo that like everything has to be AI, or we're going to stop hiring people unless we can prove that AI can't do it. I think those are interesting things for a CEO to say, but I think we're just focused on what are the things that we can do to get better. I do think, like, and one of the things I say to the folks on the team is that, like, I'm more worried that we're not going to use enough AI than we're going to use too much. Kind of, when in doubt, like, should we be doing this, or like, or can I use this new tool? It's like, yeah, give it a try, because I think that can be, I think a startup's competitive advantage is you can move faster, and I think adopting some of these new techniques faster than some of these other companies is how we're going to do well.
Okay, so Jordan, this was a great podcast, and I'm sure many of the listeners will probably comment a lot more about, hey, MotherDuck should be an AI company, like most of the data companies that are coming in, just like what Neon Tech got bought out by I think by Databricks, for $1 billion+. It's an interesting age. So compliments to you for the journey till date. The combination of product-led sales and sales-led approach, and having usage-based pricing, these are all cutting edge. It's very heartening to hear from someone like you that you've taken that particular approach. Wish you all the luck. And there you go, guys. That's Jordan Tigani from MotherDuck. Wonderful having you, Jordan, on this one.